All right, so let's first do some data preparation, and we will again be working with pivot tables. So to make sure that we don't lose any people and each respondent is still intact, let's give them an ID. So right click on the first column, insert and say ID. And here it doesn't really matter what the numbers are, so we can do 1, 2, 3, hover on the corner and double click, and you will see, you can scroll down and see that now each participant or each respondent in our sample has a unique number. We will need this afterwards. This is so that pivot tables can be created and we don't collapse everything into means. You will see that this is useful. It's generally a good idea to always have an original file and keep an ID on each participant in some way or on each line so that you can always roll back. Now let's try to restructure our data a little bit, so not even restructure, but clean it up a little bit so that it's more intuitive, so that we don't have to have this legend, but we have everything, all the information that we might possibly need inside our data. Let's start with gender. So I will click and copy it here. And now we're going to be doing an if function. So what we will ask Excel to do is to say, okay, if you see 0 in this cell in the column gender, please type in female, according to our legend it's female, here in this cell. And if you see 1 here, then please type in male, write the word male. We're going to use an if function to do that. So you click equals and you type in if, you can double click on it, and then Excel will start telling you what to do, and it's always useful to read on these things. These are your hints. So as I said, tell if in this cell you see 0, then comma, what should you do? Type, don't forget the quotes here, type in female, comma. What if it's not 0? We can say otherwise type 1. But what if we have some other values here? So this would work, but we'll try a couple of other things. If you double click right here, the formula extended for the whole data, let's scroll down. We didn't tell what to do, otherwise type 1. This is a mistake. Let's start over. Otherwise type, we can say male. Now we again double click and make sure that our formula extended. Now it says one's male. But what if we overlooked something and there's something else, kind of a diverse gender or something like this, or it's another category? So instead of just so that we're sure that there are no errors, let's type in a more extended formula. So this is also a way that will work if you are sure that you only have zeros and ones. Then you say 0 is female, otherwise male. This is what we did. If this cell is 0, type female, otherwise type male. Now let's try to create an if function when we say if this is 0, type female, if this is 1, type male, and if it's something else, then type error. So let's delete this formula and create a more complex one. So this will be a formula within a formula, getting a little bit more complex. But remember, the structure is the same and it's always useful. So we can say if, we start exactly the same way, if this cell here is 0, comma, then type, write female here. Now we need to say again if, so we just create the same thing again. We write in formula within the formula, and you already know that you can work in a piece of formula inside of a bigger formula in Excel. So we type in if again, and we say if the cell in this column is 1, then type, let's not forget the quotes, male. Close it and we did not do anything. What to do otherwise, right? Type male. What if otherwise? Then type arrow. Now let's extend this formula. As you can see, you always need to use only the first cell, because once you drag the formula, it takes the respective cell from the respective row. Let's scroll down to males. So it looks like it worked here as well. Now let's play around a little bit and see, okay, what if we have 3, a diverse gender here? Look, it says arrow. Of course, if you have actual 3s here, then you need to say diverse or something along these lines. Let's correct it back to 0. So just as it sinks in, you see the first formula is here. We say if this cell is 0, type female, otherwise, then we create another one. So this chunk is just basically an otherwise story in this outer if formula. And here we say if this is 1, then please type male, otherwise type arrow. So we created male, female now. Great. Now let's do the launch variable. So I don't like typing things because that increases the chances that I will make a typo. So whenever I can copy something, I do that. Press escape. And let's now keep on doing the same more complex formula. So we say if, just to be sure that we only have 0s and 1s, and we'll check afterwards if there are any errors there. So if lunch equals 0, that means, according to our legend, standard. What if it's not standard? Well, then if lunch equals 1, what do we say? Then please type reduced. And what if it's neither 0 nor 1, then type arrow. And close the brackets, and Excel highlights that now you see it's red, it's only an inner bracket. You need 2 brackets. Now we closed inner and outer formula. Click enter and hover on the corner, extend, and we created the formula everywhere. So the third time we're doing it, now we're doing a test prep story. The same as before, just to be sure, we're creating an if within an if function. So starting simple, if test prep equals 0, then we need to ask Excel to write no. Let's take a small no. If it's not 0, let's say then if it is, if here we had 1, what should we type? Yes. And what if it's not 1 and not 0? Then let's type again error. And place 2 brackets so that inner and outer form is closed. Double click and extend. Now let's highlight the whole table, Shift, Control, and arrow down so that you have the whole table selected, and let's add a filter to it, just so that we quickly check. We only have males and females here. Perfect. We only have reduced and standard here, and only no and yes here. So we really didn't need to write this complex formula, but you should know that it's possible, and generally if you have 3 options, that would be also a fastest way to go, and it's better to always have a fail switch for yourself, just to make sure, that there is no error anywhere, because you need to give Excel all the options possible to cover your bases, so to say. Now, we also have a legend where we have 5 different categories in the race and ethnicity, and 6 different categories in parental education. So that's already a lot to work with the if function. It is possible to do that, but this is going to be difficult. So we're going to use a VLOOKUP function. Basically, what we would like to do, to tell Excel to do, is to say, all right, so let's work with race and ethnicity. if I see number 1 in race and ethnicity, please type in A, and the principle is the same. If you see number 2, please type in group B, and so on and so forth. How do we do that with the VLOOKUP? So VLOOKUP, let's create more cells, more columns, so that we have a little bit of space here. And let's remove the filter. So race and ethnicity. I will tell Excel to feed out of this legend instead of telling different if conditions. I will tell it to feed out of this cell. This is done by the VLOOKUP function. Let's do it and see what it actually does and figure it out as we go. So we say VLOOKUP, double click on it, lookup value. So far everything like in the if function. So we say look at this cell, and then it asks us for table error. This is this one here. We select this table and we need to freeze it. We won't freeze it right now so that you see what happens if you don't do this. Now we selected this column. Now it asks us about the column index. What is that? Basically what VLOOKUP is doing, it says, okay, look at this value here, find this value in the first column of this table and tell me what's across from it. And in this case we're interested in the group, so it's the second column of the table, so we press number 2. And then we need to do an exact match, because sometimes you will be looking for words or something like this, so it's better if you have an exact match. So you select false, double click on it and close. And look, Excel found that number 2 corresponds to group B. So now let's extend it and see. Oh, well, that doesn't look like it worked really well. And what is the reason for it? Exactly because we didn't freeze the table. It's nice that the first cell moves along as we go down and extend it down our table, but we want to keep this table frozen because otherwise it starts traveling again. Exactly for this we need to press F4 and freeze it everywhere. Now let's double click on it again, and now it looks much better. So again, just to recap, what did Excel do? We told Excel to look at this value, find this value, or it could be a word. Remember, it could be a word as well, it doesn't matter. Find this value in the first column of the table we're interested in, and then give us a corresponding cell in whatever line, which would be, we said, number 2, second column, so we're interested in group. You will see if I change this 2 here to 1, it will produce 2. So first things to remember, let's roll it back to 2. Things to remember about VLOOKUP. If you look for this value in this table, here in race and ethnicity legend table, you need to make sure that the values you're looking for are in the first column, always in the first column, and then you can select any column with a corresponding value that you're interested in. So one way to use VLOOKUP is exactly to apply your legend into your data set. But a more common way for VLOOKUP, a more common situation where you would use it is when, for example, you have two tables and you need to merge them. Let's say you and your colleague were calling to different clients and asking them the same question, collecting information. And some of you called to both, and some of you called to some unique customers. So there are some overlaps in the table. You might want to merge them, so this would be an option to do that. Or maybe you have your customers, and in one file you have their social demographic characteristic, and in another file you also have IDs and, let's say, their purchasing behavior. It would be nice to have everything in one the social demographic, and also some purchases. How you do it? You can match using VLOOKUP all these tables using the ID. Here, the other important thing to remember about VLOOKUP is that when I'm looking at this table, and when Excel looks at this table, whenever it finds the number or a value or a word it's looking for, it stops. It doesn't go further in the table. So for example, if I enter instead of 4 number 2 here, you will see, okay, first of all, the 4's died, but most importantly, whenever we have 2, it's always group B, because Excel was going, you want number 2 in this table. Where's number 2? It's here. Okay, I stop here and go to group B. It will not go until the second value. This is also something to remember. It stops once it found the first one. So let's roll it back to number 4. Now let's do the same thing with parental education. And again, we are looking for value of parental education. First need to tell the Excel that it's VLOOKUP. We look parental education value. We have number 5 here. Let's find the table that we're referring to, this one. Let's make sure that we froze this table. And if Excel finds number 5 in this column of the table, what should it tell me? A bachelor's degree. That's a second column, so we write number 2. And we again want an exact match, double click, close the parentheses, and extend. Now let's again check that there are no arrows anywhere. Let's highlight, Shift, Control, and arrow down. We have the whole table. Applying filter and check. Okay, we have groups A, B, D, and E. No group C in our sample. And we have all kinds of levels of parental education. Important thing, we don't have this scary NA, so the formula didn't fail anywhere, which is good. That all of our matching techniques and data preparation techniques worked. Now we have a couple of variables doubled in our data, and that's not going to be convenient if we start working with pivot tables. So we need to remove the duplicates. But our formulas are holding on those. So if I just delete gender, look what happens. It loses the reference. So let's roll back. Everything is good again. We have our female, but we need to remove the formulas. And once we remove the formulas and have only values here, we can get rid of some of the information that is irrelevant for us now, because we created in a more user-friendly format, in the wording format. So let's select everything here, all the variables that we created. You don't need to select the name. Then again, Shift, Control, and arrow down. And now the easiest way to kill all the formulas is to copy and paste. So you press Ctrl C and Ctrl V right away. You basically copied and pasted the entire thing right here. You have this little label here, click on it and just say values. Now we only have words here, nothing else. So now if I delete gender from here, there is nothing going on because there's no reference anymore. So the general principle is when you don't have to delete the formulas, don't, because then you can roll back and find out actually what was going on before. What is the formula? What is it based on? So if you don't have to delete the formulas, don't. An alternative way to do that would be to roll back. Say we have all the formulas. Ideally, you say this is your original, more or less, and then you can copy. So I'm pressing Shift and dragging it up. And now I have a copy of student scores. That means that all my formulas are intact here. And here I will make my table smaller. So here again, I select all the new variables that we created, press Ctrl C, Ctrl V, so copy and paste right away, and say paste only values. So now all my formulas are dead here, but still alive and kicking here. That means that I'm going to be working with the tab number 2, removing gender, race, parental indication, lunch, test prep, scores, and all the variables on all the references still intact because I killed all the references. And the good thing now, we don't even need the legend, so let's delete that as well. Our file is ready. Let's highlight it so that we remember that this is our source column and this is our original, so we can call this original, and this will be our pivot table source. And it's highlighted so that when we're flipping through our tabs, we know which one to roll back to. So this is the first step. This is a little bit of data preparation and very useful to function. If function and VLOOKUP function saves a lot of time. So try to make sure you mastered those. This is really, really something that will be useful, and it's really a quick and nifty way to prepare your data or restructure some of it.